Once again, good afternoon and welcome. Today, the United States Army, represented by the soldiers of the 3rd United States Infantry Regiment, the Old Guard, and the United States Army Band, Pershing's Own, welcomes the 22nd Secretary of the Army, the Honorable Eric K. Fanning. Participating in today's review, from left to right, is the United States Army Band, Pershing's Own, formed in 1922 by then Army Chief of Staff General John J. Pershing. The United States Army Band is the premier band of our senior service. Pershing's Own provides musical support for ceremonies and special events in our nation's capital and throughout the United States. The United States Army Band is under the direction of Major Leo Hagen and led by Drum Major Julian Ayers. Elements of the Old Guard include Bravo Company, commanded by Captain David Hunter, and led by Sergeant First Class John Kidstone. Next on line is Delta Company, commanded by Captain Andrew Durango, and led by Sergeant First Class Dennis Morgan. Since the days of the American Revolution, the colors have been one of the most important elements of a military unit, as soldiers kept their position in formation by dressing on the colors. At the center of our formation and bearing the national color is the nation's foremost color team, the 3rd Infantry's Continental Color Guard, led by Staff Sergeant David Hess. Next on line is Honor Guard Company, commanded by Captain Alexander Triplett, and led by First Sergeant Russell O'Donnell. Following is the Commander-in-Chief's Guard, patterned after the unit created by General George Washington in 1776 to be his personal guard. The Commander-in-Chief's Guard is commanded by Captain Michael Sims, and led by First Sergeant Jason Taylor. The last element on line, dressed in the Continental Musician's uniform, is the United States Army Old Guard Fife and Drum Corps. During the American Revolution, musicians wore the reverse colors of their parents' infantry unit. The men and women of the United States Army Old Guard Fife and Drum Corps maintain this tradition by wearing red coats instead of the infantry blue. The Corps is led today by Drum Major Mark Matrinko. To the right of the formation is the Presidential Salute Battery, led today by Sergeant Joshua Cowan. And to the rear of the formation are the 56 state and territorial flags of the United States, commanded by Captain Giovanni Tomasi, and led by Sergeant First Class Joseph Brown. The history of the 3rd United States Infantry Regiment reflects the growth and development of our nation. 55 well-earned battle streamers, 2 Valorous Unit Awards, 3 Meritorious Unit Commendations, and 5 Superior Unit Awards attest to the Old Guard's record of bravery in action and achievements during peacetime. In 1922, the War Department granted permission for the Old Guard to pass in review with bayonets fixed. The Old Guard will now fix bayonets to the traditional beat of the drum. Ladies and gentlemen, moving into position is the commander of troops for today's ceremony, Lieutenant Colonel Ryan J. Morgan, Commander, 4th Battalion, 3rd United States Infantry Regiment, the Old Guard. Ladies and gentlemen, moving on to the reviewing stand is the reviewing official for today's ceremony, the Honorable Eric K. Fanning, 22nd Secretary of the Army, accompanied by our hosts, the Honorable Ashton Carter, Secretary of Defense, and General Mark A. Milley, Chief of Staff, United States Army. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand as honors are rendered and remain standing for the invocation by Chaplain Kenneth Williams, Pentagon Chaplain.
The challenges and demands of leadership at the national level are great. I invite all of you gathered here today to join me in prayer according to your faith tradition and to send positive energy, asking for God's blessing on this ceremony, and especially for God's grace for Secretary Eric Fanning. Gracious and merciful God, all wise, all powerful, you work to inspire and empower us to serve the common good of humanity. I thank you for preparing Secretary Fanning for this awesome position of service, for guiding his path into instructive experiences, for strengthening his character, and for endowing him with leadership abilities and management skills so that he is fully equipped to assume this responsibility and effectively lead the United States Army. As he teams with the Chief of Staff of the Army and other senior leaders, grant him wisdom, discernment, vision, courage, and physical stamina to shape a powerful and resilient force characterized by a culture of respectful engagement that values diversity and does not exclude others through putting conditions on their love, cooperation, and service. A culture that creates the conditions for all soldiers, civilians, and family members from all faith groups, nationalities, races, and backgrounds to thrive and succeed. A culture that inhibits and does not tolerate the injustices of sexual assault, harassment, incivility, and oppression. And finally, a culture that inspires us to fight for the rights and dignity of all people. For as Dr. King said, no one is free until we are all free. And through his leadership, may we practice and model for the nation and the world the greatest form of love, which is laying down our lives in selfless service, sometimes to the point of death, for the good and liberty of all the peoples of the world, not just those who like us or who are like us, for true love, that is selfless service, never fails. It always wins out. God bless Secretary Fanning and his loving and supportive family. God bless the Army and all our forces around the world. And God bless America. Amen.
Please be seated.
geography. Okay.
Put my eyes in the viewfinder. It's clear. I can't hear anything.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the United States National Anthem. Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, Secretary Carter.
Before I start, just take a moment and behold what's in front of us here. Look at these magnificent, proud members of our Army. And what we're here about, it's them that we're here about today, to give them the leadership they deserve. Secretary Fanning, it's an honor to formally welcome you. And it's also a pleasure to welcome Ben, your mother, Kathy, your sister, Erin, your entire family. And General Milley, Mark, I appreciate the confidence I can have in you for your dedication to our soldiers throughout the world, to the future of the Army. To the members of the diplomatic community here today, thank you for honoring us with your presence. I'd also like to welcome the senators and members of Congress who've joined us, and all the White House officials and members of our DoD family, past and present, who are here on this important day for our country and for our Army. It's been a privilege for me to work alongside Eric Fanning for many years and watch him develop into one of our country's most knowledgeable, dedicated, and experienced public servants. I've seen firsthand why he is one of this administration's most trusted and capable appointees, and one of the Pentagon's most dependable civilian leaders. Secretary Fanning served as my Chief of Staff when I first became Secretary of Defense. I looked to him to help me recruit and attract a talented and innovative team of civilian and military leaders, many of whom are with us today. And he served in senior leadership roles not just there, but in each of our military departments, including time as Undersecretary of the Air Force and Acting Secretary of the Air Force, as well as Deputy Undersecretary of the Navy. And that gives him a unique perspective on the pivotal connections that bind our joint force. From his service in positions of responsibility on non-proliferation issues and weapons of mass destruction, to his proven leadership and resource management, Secretary Fanning understands the full spectrum of responsibilities and opportunities that we face as a 21st century military. We have today no fewer than 5 major, immediate, and evolving challenges. Countering the prospect of Russian aggression and coercion, especially in Europe. Managing historic change in the vital Asia-Pacific region, where China's rising, which is fine, but behaving aggressively, which is not. Strengthening our deterrent and defense forces in the face of North Korea's nuclear provocations. Checking Iranian aggression and malign influence in the Gulf. And confronting terrorism, including accelerating the defeat of ISIL in its parent tumor in Iraq and Syria and wherever else it metastasizes. And moreover, since we have a pretty good record of never successfully predicting the strategic future, we must also be flexible and agile in preparing for it, for unknowns that we can't anticipate today. Secretary Fanning and General Milley understand all this, understand what must be done to ensure the readiness and strength of the Army to confront the challenges of today's security environment. They're working together to strengthen the Army's unparalleled ability, forged over the last 15 years, much longer, to carry out its core mission, which is to seize, to hold, and to dominate physical and human terrain. They aren't resting on the current excellence of our Army, they're doubling down on it, ensuring that our ground forces are agile, unrivaled in posture, ready for full-spectrum operations, and always prepared to defend America's interests and values. And they've never forgotten that the true strength of our force is our people. And that's why, under the leadership of Secretary Fanning and General Milley, The Army is moving forward with several key initiatives we've introduced across the department to build the force of the future. These include supporting greater flexibility in the officer promotion system and improvements in our family policies to help retain soldiers serving today, such as expanded maternity and paternity leave and extended child care hours on base, and also greater opportunities for our soldiers to gain outside experience in the private sector. These and many other changes in both our uniformed and civilian policies will help to ensure that amid changes in generations, changes in technologies, and changes in labor markets, we continue to bring in, develop, and retain the best young men and women that America has to offer for our all-volunteer Army. That's also why we've opened all combat positions to women who can meet our standards. And Secretary Fanning and General Milley are doing an excellent job ensuring the successful implementation of this change and others to come. A key capability of an institution that has shown the best combination of tradition and competitive adaptation over 241 years. At the Department of Defense, we're constantly looking for ways to innovate and think outside of our five-sided box, innovating not only in our technology, but also in our operations, in our strategies, and how we manage our people. Secretary Fanning and General Milley embody that spirit of innovation and the kind of strong and steady leadership that will ensure our successors and our successors' successors continue to inherit the finest fighting force the world has ever known. So it's an honor to formally welcome Secretary Fanning as Secretary of the Army. And I want to thank him for everything he's doing on behalf of all the soldiers and military families who serve today, from the mountains of Afghanistan to the plains of Eastern Europe, to the Korean Peninsula, to enabling our partners on the ground in Iraq and Syria. And as he works to protect those who protect our country, Secretary Fanning could not have a better chief than the man I'm about to introduce. Ladies and gentlemen, another leader whose nomination was easy to recommend to the President, Army Chief of Staff, General Mark Milley. Mark.
Oh, and it's a great day to be in the Army, and it's a great week. It's our 241st birthday, so happy birthday, Army. And yes, I am aware it's really hot, and those are wool uniforms. So for all of you, this will be a very short speech. But I want to first say good afternoon to everybody and thank Secretary Carter for those kind words of introduction, and thank you for your confidence in our Army. And most of all, thank you for selecting Eric Fanning as our Secretary of the Army. I know we have a lot of congressional leaders, ambassadors, fellow general officers, distinguished guests, soldiers, friends, family of the Army, and family of Secretary Fanning. Thank you all for being here. As Secretary Carter pointed out, before you is the 3rd United States Infantry, the Old Guard, the oldest active serving infantry unit in the United States Army. And among them, a Pershing Zone, the Fife and Drum, the Salute Battery. And they not only do ceremonies, but they bury our dead, and they honor our Army throughout America 24/7. So how about a great round of applause for those on the field? So today's a very special day as we recognize an officially arrived Secretary of the Army, Eric Fanning. And let me begin by saying I've worked for a few secretaries in the last 10 months that I've been the Chief of Staff, and I think I may have set a record. First, it was Secretary McHugh, then it was Secretary Fanning, then it was Secretary Murphy, and now it's Secretary Fanning. So 4 in 10 months, And how sweet that is to actually have a Senate-confirmed Secretary of the Army on our 241st birthday. So thank you, Secretary Fanning, for getting confirmed. You know, I know there's a lot of members of Congress here, and in the Second Continental Congress on 10 May 1775, the United States Second Continental Congress created the United States Army, or the Continental Army, from companies of Pennsylvania riflemen. And only 5 weeks later, that Army was real. So it's not bad work when they didn't have PowerPoint slides or the internet. In only 5 weeks, they created an army. But it took 6 months to confirm my secretary. So all I ask of my Congress is please pass the budget in the next 5 weeks. All right. Everyone's applauding except the Congress. All right. I'm sure I'll be punished for that, but that's great. So 5 weeks, that's a suspense. But budget or no budget, thankfully Eric Fanning is here to stay. And I can speak on behalf of all of us in uniform that we're absolutely thrilled to have you finally aboard. And there is much work to be done, so I have to get him back to work. But I want you to know that I've had the privilege of getting to know Secretary Fanning very well since last fall, and there's no surprise to any of you who know him. Eric Fanning is an incredible professional. He's completely committed to our Army, both the soldiers and the families. And he is first class in every way imaginable. As an Army, we could not be luckier and more proud of our new Secretary. I have observed him closely and discussed critical and complex issues. I have witnessed him honor our fallen soldiers with deep and genuine compassion at Fort Hood. I've seen him travel to get to know our forces, both in the continental United States and overseas. And I can tell you that he's extraordinarily talented. He's thoughtful, he's calm, and he's a man of immense personal courage and integrity. Eric Fanning is absolutely the right person to serve as our 22nd Secretary of the Army. And Secretary Carter, thank you again for nominating him. He joins a team at a critical time as the Army balances current and future requirements in an unpredictable world of challenging threats, budgets, and missions, and he's fought and will continue to fight very hard for our Army, and importantly, he will be a stabilizing force for our future. He joins our Army team as we are engaged around the world in 2 wars in the Middle East and Southwest Asia. We assure our allies and deter adversaries in Europe, Asia, Africa, Central and South America, with 187,000 troops deployed in 140 countries as of this morning in support of our combatant commanders. Secretary Fanning will lead us through tough resourcing decisions and challenging fiscal realities, leading a team effort with the Secretary of Defense and OSD and Congress to resource our Army as a critical component of the joint force to deal with the serious challenges of terrorism, Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, and many others, all the while setting the conditions for a future force that is balanced, modern, and takes advantages of all the talents of all Americans that have to offer, regardless of the color of their skin, regardless of their religion, regardless of their national origin, regardless of their gender, regardless of their identity, or their sexual preference. The United States Army is open to all Americans who meet the standard, regardless of who they are. Embedded within our Constitution is that very principle that all Americans are free and equal, and we as an Army are sworn to protect and defend that very principle. And we are sworn to even die for that principle. So if we in uniform are willing to die for that principle, then we in uniform should be willing to live by that principle. He joins Secretary Fanning joins a team of exceptional military and civilian professionals, and Secretary Fanning will lead the way in implementing that very, very essence of what it means to be an American, the values embedded within that document, the U.S. Constitution. He joins an organization that demands high standards, values teamwork, and most importantly, gets results in the brutal task of ground warfare. He's proven his deep commitment to our mission and concern for our troops and their families, and there's no doubt in my mind he will get results. His previous experiences working in various departments of the Department of Defense have set him up well for the challenges he will face. And his leadership will ensure that we, the United States Army, remain ready and we remain the most capable Army in the world. Mr. Secretary, on behalf of all the soldiers in the Army today, all of those that are retired, and all of the civilians of the United States Army and all of our families, we want to welcome you from the bottom of our hearts to the team, and I, for one, and so I'm very proud to call you my secretary. Army strong.
Ladies and gentlemen, Secretary Fanning.
Mr. Secretary-in-Chief, thank you. And thank you to OSD Protocol, Army Protocol, all the folks at Fort Myer, and the Military District of Washington. Chaplain, thank you so much for that moving invocation. It's wonderful to have you a part of this afternoon. As I stand here on this beautiful, albeit warm afternoon, all that's running through my mind is how long it took to get here. I had begun to worry that my arrival ceremony and my departure ceremony would be the same day. And regardless of when or where, as you've heard already, we have these amazing soldiers standing in front of us now. I have been to countless ceremonies here before and never tire of it. But I never imagined one day I'd be standing here and the parade would be in my honor. Thank you to the men and women of the Old Guard. You do your Army proud, and you do your country proud. And you do it regardless of weather conditions, freezing cold or scorching hot like today. Today is a very special day for me and my family, and that's largely because of you. Thank you. Mr. Secretary, thank you for this opportunity and for all that I've learned from you. Little did I know the journey that you'd set me on when you asked me to be your Chief of Staff last year. In 12 frenetic months, I moved from the Air Force to your office, to Acting Secretary of the Army, Undersecretary of the Army, to Acting Secretary of the Army, then due to the vagaries of the confirmation process, back to your office again, all in 1 year. Now that the process is in the past tense, I can say it's worth it. Chief, we first met when you were being interviewed for your position and while I was in vetting to be nominated for Secretary of the Army. Somehow, you found out before it was even leaked publicly that I was in vetting. And from that moment on, we got together whenever we could to learn about each other, understand each other's priorities, and form a team that was strong before I even moved to the Army as acting under. I'm incredibly grateful for your support, counsel, and most important, your sense of humor. A lot has been written about my nomination and confirmation. Countless references to the historic, first-of-a-kind nature of my appointment. Yes, it's true, I'm a first. I'm the first service secretary who worked for his fellow service secretaries while they were service secretaries. Ray Mabus and Debbie James, I know how you think, I know all your tricks, I know where you hide your money, and I'm bringing all that intel to the Army. Nobody gets an opportunity like this without a lot of help, which is particularly true in my case. I initially resisted having such a large welcoming ceremony with so much pomp and circumstance, but eventually agreed for two reasons. First, this is Army tradition. Protocol basically told me to get over it and show up. Second, I realized I needed such a big venue in order to invite all the many people I needed to thank for making this possible. I realized that the more you include, the more you exclude, but I need to call out a few people. First and foremost, my mother, Kathy. She taught me how to say thank you, so she should be the first I thank. For health reasons, she couldn't be at my last welcome ceremony when I was sworn in as the Undersecretary of the Air Force, but wouldn't have missed this one for the world. She even came up for my confirmation hearing in January, sitting behind me and glaring at each senator who asked me any questions. Senator Ernst and Senator Sullivan are here. Thank you. I think they can bear witness to that fact. Mom had to wait a little while for this ceremony. She told me she bought a dress last year, then returned it to buy something warmer as my confirmation process dragged on. Then returned that as winter came and went. And when she bought the dress she's wearing now, she told me she wasn't getting another one, so I'd better get confirmed soon. Mom, we made it. Thanks for everything. I have 3 uncles who were career military officers. Here today is my Uncle Jerry Vitarelli and my Aunt Barbara. Jerry was a military intelligence officer in the Air Force. I watched in wonder as a kid as they moved around the world. All 3 of my cousins born in different countries, and all 3 of them are here today. Diana, Victor, and Scott, thank you for joining. The other 2 uncles were both West Point graduates. Jack Fanning, class of '60, who is no longer with us, and Rocky Ventrella, class of 1953. He couldn't be here today, but he's watching, and his daughter is here, my cousin Joanne. Thank you, Joanne, for being here. Uncle Rocky was a troop commander in the 101st and 82nd Airborne Divisions, a combat infantryman in the Big Red 1 in Vietnam, a master parachutist and a ranger. My first visit to the Pentagon as a young kid was to get a tour of him when he was chief of the Middle East region for policies and plans in the Office of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. During one of his West Point tours, he was assigned to completely reorganize the admissions department, turning it into a highly selective program eventually emulated by the other academies. This is likely why the Chief of Staff of the Army had to attend Princeton. Uncle Jack's assignments took him to Korea, the University of Michigan, Thule, Greenland, Fort Leonard Wood, many times to Fort Bliss, and also to West Point, where at one point he and Rocky were working there at the same time. Early in his career, he served as an aide-de-camp to General Omar Bradley. My mother still talks proudly of meeting General Bradley up at West Point. All 3 of their wives, Barbara, Edith, and Joan, served all those many years as well, as only military spouses can, through so many moves and so much time apart. They exemplify what we've all learned many times. Soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines have a knack for marrying up. My sister Erin is here with her 3 children, Zachary, Nicholas, and Julia. This date was not picked around Secretary Carter's schedule, or my schedule, or the chief's schedule, but around the kids' schooling. That was a no-brainer. It wouldn't be right to have this ceremony without you here. Thanks for coming up. Now get out of my house. And Ben Masri Cohen, Ben, nobody witnessed the craziness of the last few months more closely than you. Thanks for being the perfect antidote to a torturous confirmation process. To all the many others here today that I know from school all the way back to middle school, from work in my neighborhood, thank you so much for being here today. I am incredibly honored to be here today. There are 1.4 million soldiers, active guard and reserve, and civilians in the Army. That's a big number, but a very small percentage of the American population, and too few Americans have an understanding of what their Army is doing. They know about Iraq and Afghanistan, where many are serving valiantly today, and where too many made the ultimate sacrifice over the past 15 years, many of whose final resting place is just behind these trees at Arlington National Cemetery. But they don't understand the full impact that our Army has across our country and around the world. There are just over 15,000 foreign service members in our government. And as the chief said, today, there are over 180,000 soldiers outside the United States in more than 140 countries. They don't just fight for our freedoms, they represent us. Our soldiers are the face of America. I saw this firsthand just last week when I traveled to Poland for Anaconda 16, a military exercise involving over 31,000 participants from 24 nations. I asked a 19-year-old soldier what his biggest surprise was, and he said support. He meant the support of the Polish people. Crowds of Poles turned out, flags waving, as their convoy moved across Poland. And when they took a Bradley fighting vehicle to a nearby town for a static display, that young soldier beamed with pride when he told me about the waves of children clamoring onto the vehicle for pictures. And this isn't new, nor is it fleeting. Think of the story we've all heard of the World War II cemetery in Margraten, Netherlands. More than 8,000 Americans are buried there. To this day, every one of those graves is adopted and tended to by a Dutch family. In at least one case, 5 successive generations of a family have been involved in tending their adopted grave, and there's actually a waiting list to adopt graves even today. 600,000 people a year visit that cemetery. 40% of them are school children. That 19-year-old in Poland was thinking about the impact he and his fellow soldiers are having today, without fully realizing that the impact of his and his fellow soldiers' presence will last for years to come. And it happens all over the world. When the problem is so big, they can't think of who else can tackle it, they turn to the U.S. Army. When Hurricane Sandy struck, who'd they call? The Army Corps of Engineers. The Corps drained 286 million gallons of salt water in just 9 days out of the New York City subway system. In the 10 years following Hurricane Katrina, the Corps designed and built $14.5 billion 100-year storm protective system for New Orleans, a feat of engineering that includes 133 miles of protections, 350 miles of canals, and a gated storm barrier that contains more concrete than the Hoover Dam and is visible from space. Let me brag on the Corps just for a little bit longer. Few people in this country realize the impact it has on their daily lives. Just here in D.C., they built the U.S. Capitol Dome, the Washington Monument, the Lincoln Memorial, the Library of Congress, and the Pentagon, though I'm not sure we want credit for that last one. 360 million people a year visit Army Corps of Engineer land for outdoor recreation. That is more than visit National Park Service land. They are the largest hydropower producer in the United States, and they are leading the largest ecosystem restoration program in the Florida Everglades in the history of the world. And when the Smithsonian finally displays its new T-Rex skeleton, there will be a sign that says, "On loan from the United States Army." And it's not even our only T-Rex. And the work of our 1 million uniformed soldiers, active guard and reserve, is supported by an amazing 400,000 civilians. These civilians are often caught in the dysfunctional political vice of Washington, cynically described as paper pushers and bureaucrats. But as former Secretary of Defense Bob Gates said, nobody suffers the bureaucracy more than bureaucrats who have to get up and fight it every day. They are vested in the mission, dedicated to doing what they can to support those who volunteer to defend our nation. They are scientists, inventors, teachers, technicians, maintainers, weapons experts. They help run our schools, our test ranges, our installations, and our commissaries. And like them, I'm committed every day to do what is necessary to support our soldiers, as individuals and as an army, to do as asked of them, because much is and much will be. That means resilient soldiers who are fully trained and properly equipped. To ensure they are resilient, we must redouble our efforts to eliminate sexual assault and suicide. We must ensure that everybody has access to behavioral health services, and that we eliminate the stigma attached with seeking help, a sign of strength, not of weakness. And they must know we are taking care of their families when they are away from home. We must make sure they are trained for the full range of contingencies, not just the kind of fighting we have seen in Iraq and Afghanistan. That means the kind of large-scale, integrated, decisive action training that I witnessed in Poland last week. And to make sure they are equipped in a way that always maintains a decisive advantage over any adversary, we must work to get capability to them more rapidly and as efficiently as possible. We must find more ways to cut time and money out of our acquisitions process, to better serve our soldiers, to be better stewards of taxpayer money, and to streamline the system for the many talented Army civilians who slog through the processes we put in their way. And we must find a way to better harness the innovation taking place outside the Department of Defense. As Secretary Carter has said, the race now depends on who can out-innovate faster than anyone else. Finally, we must continue to open up opportunities for those who meet the standards, but were previously denied the opportunity to serve. By leveraging diversity and creating an inclusive environment in which all are valued, we engender opportunities for people to be part of the greatest mission there is, defending our nation's security. This is actually something the military does very successfully. We rely on those diverse backgrounds, perspectives, and expertise to train, fight, and win in a complex security environment. And if we don't embrace diversity and inclusion, if we don't live our Army values and treat each other with dignity and respect, we threaten the very readiness we are prioritizing. Not many people know what an Army Secretary does. I've been asked if I wear a uniform, if I'm a general, how many words a minute I type. But my answer is always the same. It's the best job in the world. Thank you all for being here. Go Army, beat Navy.
gentlemen, the Army Song.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes today's ceremony. Please join Secretary Fanning for a reception in the Fort Myer Officers Club.